Well, hello, church. It's good to see you again. I'm glad you've had a good summer series, and they bring me in to kill it. So compared to me, all the other ones will start looking even better. And I think that's part of my job, and I'm happy to do it. I'm getting to that stage of life where I get to do what I want to do because I'm just too hard-headed to not do what I want to do. When people ask me to come, they very often want me to talk about church organization, church issues and the like, because for about 30 years I've flown around the country averaging 70-something flights a year, working with churches, helping them change, helping them get their feet back under them. I don't do that much anymore. And the reason is, about 3 years ago, I told my wife, all I really want to do is tell Jesus stories. That's all I want to do. Let me explain why. I fear that we don't know Jesus. We know cartoon versions of Jesus. We know our Bible school versions of Jesus. And I love Bible school. I'm all for it. And then when I get to heaven, a lot of reason is going to be because of my Bible school teachers. But of necessity, we're almost doing a drive-by on Jesus' life, doing a quick peek in. One of the reasons I'm here, rather than not a person of faith at all, is because of something I made myself do a long time ago. Right before I came back to America in the 80s, I made myself read the Gospels for 6 months, over and over and over. My faith at that time was varying from non-existent to barely alive. By the time I was done with the 6 months reading, my wife, who's always been a wonderful, strong Christian person, said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I'm not sure if he's the Son of God, but I would go to hell for this guy. This guy's amazing." Within a few months, I was certain he was the Son of God. Again, I'd been raised by good Christian people. My going off the rails was my fault, not theirs or anybody else's. Coming back, the Gospels brought me back. I now live in the Gospels, and I think about the Gospels, and I listen to the Gospels. And I'm going to show you tonight, and a couple stories you really already know. If we have time to do two, we'll do two. You already know these stories. The problem is we run ahead to the moral. We run ahead to the payoff. We're going to look at John 11, the story of Jesus and Lazarus. And as soon as we do that, you think of, oh, he raised him from the dead. Stop it. Don't go there. I will submit to you that the raising of Lazarus from the dead is the least interesting part of the story. And by far, the least surprising. The miracles of Jesus, we always want to go, and he turned the water to wine, and he walked on the water. And I'm going, he's God. Why is this a surprise? Instead, let's see how he got there. Let's see what happened. Listen, if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, to the dogs that bark and the dogs that don't. Let's listen to the silent parts. Let's see what is not said. Starting here, and by the way, when you read one of these stories, you say, I'm going to read the Gospels. I'm going to ask you to do something else. When you read a story, stop. Don't go read the next story. Live with that story for a while. Put yourself in the story. Think about, what was it like when the people heard that story? Or when they watched this? Or when he said this? Where was the sun? Were they by the water? What did that sound like? What did it smell like with all those people? What were the expressions on their faces? For example, do this sometime. Read the Sermon on the Mount and notice when you stop nodding. Because you will. You're going to be going, yeah, that's right, ooh. That's asking rather a lot. Watch when you stop. Do that. Live in these stories. So, John 11, I've given you time to get there on your Bible, your iPad, your iPhone, or your Android device. We don't hear pages turning anymore because people are doing, and it's silent. I really think apps should have the page turning sound. Anyway, now, a man named Lazarus was sick. We're setting up the story. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Okay, good, backstory, let's move on. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Stop there. What did they not say? They didn't say, come fix him. At this stage, they didn't know if Jesus would do that, but they were hoping for it. We'll find out later. They weren't thinking raising from dead at this stage. They were thinking, he's sick. Now, and as soon as you know that, what are you going to do? You're going to leap to action because women think that way. They say things like, oh, that's out of order. And thinking what they think they've said, please put that in order. They did not say that, but we will be held accountable. There's another story. If we have time, we'll get to it. The first miracle of Jesus, when they run out of wine at a wedding, and that's quite the tragedy. It's a social faux pas. Mary does not go to Jesus and say, they've run out of wine, please fix this for them in your ways that only you can do. No, she just says they're out of wine. Then, next scene, she's telling the servants, do whatever he tells you to do, after he said he isn't going to do anything. This is my life. And I bet it cheers as well. So, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. Hang on just a minute. Lazarus dies. And you can say, but it doesn't end in death. I know. But if you were to hear Jesus say, this will not end in death, you would not have thought, he'll die, but he'll be back. How often does Jesus disappoint us by not leaping in the moment we want him to? By the way, if you're thinking, you can't say Jesus disappoints us, you can because he does. We can be honest with God. We can wrestle with God. He actually enjoys that. Let's get involved here. No, it's for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, it's very important you understand this next bit. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. I'm not really sure why it's Martha and her sister and Lazarus and not Martha and Mary. That interests me a little bit. We can think about that for a while, but we're going to move on. So when he heard that Lazarus, he loved them. He loved them. Understand? He loved them so. When he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Did you ever notice that before? He loved them so much, he didn't do anything for a couple of days. Now, don't know about you. I will tell you that there's a certain kryptonite for me. Colds are my kryptonite. Break a bone, have to, anything like that, no problem. Cold, I'm dying. I'm dying. This is the worst cold anybody's ever had. And I need to have a list of people that I'm going to leave things to, other people I want to kiss to pass this on before I die. But I'm just awful. And when I have a cold, it's normally right before I need to speak or fly or do something. And I want to be fixed now. I've been in other countries where they sell stuff you're not allowed to sell here. And they will sell things. This fixes your cold. It doesn't. Nothing does. I'll just stand here and be depressed for a while. I want action. When I pray, I want action. I don't say, Lord, bless this food eventually. I want it blessed because I plan to fall upon it right now. So do that now. Some will say to the nourishment of our bodies, which gives him a few hours. I'm not that patient. He said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. And they're completely clueless as we would be. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back. Think about this. There's a theme. There's a sub-theme here. You can't go there. They'll kill you. This will not end in death. You ever see that before? We're playing 2 stories here. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. Oh, that explains that then. Now, in case you're thinking, Patrick's being irreverent, no. There is no higher place in my heart or my life than Jesus Christ. When he says something, that is odd and obtuse, I want to pay it. I want to show him the honor and respect of noticing it, because you're supposed to notice it. Pull back. I have grandsons. Got a granddaughter. But I want to talk about my grandsons. 8, 5, and 2. The 8-year-old has come up to me and said, "Granda," we say "da" in Ireland, Scotland. So "Granda, why aren't you ever afraid?" Now, I'm sure there are things that could frighten me somewhere. I just don't seem to have the fear gene. I've raised my kids saying fear is not an option and love is never optional. You know, fear, and I told my grandson, I said, "Have a seat, Lucas." The reason I'm not afraid of things is because I used to be. And it didn't help. Fear never moved me forward. Fear kept me from trying things. Fear took joy away. So I just decided I was done with it. I'm done. Jesus here is looking at them saying, "And what is fear of death doing for you? It's robbing you of the chance you have that daytime to do things." When people die, they rarely regret what they've done. It's interesting. We've studied this. They regret what they didn't do. And that's why kids, or not kids, 30-year-old, 40-year-olds, that's why your parents are insane. That's why they're going on a cruise and next thing you know, they're parasailing at 70. Or they're zip lining. Or they're bungee jumping, and that's always a bad idea because I'm not sure those people at the top of the bridge know how to do math. That concerns me. And you're thinking, what are they doing? They could die. Well, they figured that out. And they decided maybe they should live first. Plus, they've had a look at a couple nursing homes. And they've thought, if I don't live long enough to make it there, not a bad idea. That's what Jesus is doing here. He's like, what is fear of death doing for you, disciples? It's locking you down to where you don't move. Don't be afraid. Let's go. Well, after he'd said this, he went on to tell them, because they're not getting it. They're not getting it. And they're not stupid. They hadn't been to Bible class. They hadn't heard the Jesus stories. We have. Always remember that. After he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Not getting it. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep, so he told them plainly. It's kind of like, tried twice. You know, we do that. We'll say they passed on, they've gone to a better place. And if you don't know those expressions, you can get lost. You know, how's your mom? She went to a better place. Nashville? What? And then you can get lost when they say, no, she went to heaven. And you go, oh, I'm sorry. Then that didn't sound right. Well, I'm sad. No, that didn't sound right. I'm surprised. No, that's wrong. You can lose yourself. And they've lost themselves here. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there. Sometimes somebody has to die so that Jesus can help others become stronger. Are you willing to be the one that has to die? What are we doing? What are we doing when we go into the baptistry? We are dying and being buried. That should be a clue. When Jesus says, pick up thy cross and follow me, that should be another clue. He never says, pick up thy comfy chair. It's always thy cross. We could spend the next hour just being here quiet, thinking, are you willing to be the one that dies so that other people can have better faith? Well, I'll let you contemplate that later on your own. Or do it now while I'm talking, because nobody can tell. So that you may believe, but let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, the twin, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. I need to step aside from the story. I need to talk to you about Thomas. Thomas's first name is not Doubting. Thomas is my hero. And you might say, well, but why, Patrick? Tell me why. Oh, please. He's the only one here who says, if he's dying, I'm dying right next to him. You might say, but he doubted. Do you know why he doubted? Have you read the story? He doubted because he was the only one brave enough to leave a locked room and go into a town full of mobs. The mobs had not dissipated after all of this had happened. He went out to get food for the rest of them. He was the only one brave enough to leave the locked room. So Jesus shows up. And he doubted just like they did before Jesus showed up. He comes in, and they're telling him, hey, you just missed Jesus. You wouldn't have believed it either. So Thomas doesn't have a lot of respect for his brothers right now because they were cowards. Again, Jesus did not tell him to go to a locked room. He said, I'll meet you in Galilee. They locked themselves in a room. He's fed up with them. So that's why he goes that hyperbole, unless I put my fingers in. Jesus appears, and Thomas is the first one to call him Lord and God. Lay off, Thomas, or I'm going to come talk to you. Or, because I'm old, I'm going to die, tell Thomas what you said, and we're going to be waiting for you. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. That's an interesting phrase. That's a very interesting phrase. Why? Because there is a question we cannot answer, but you need to keep the question in mind. At each step of the way, how much did Jesus know? And when did he know it? There's no way at 3 years old he knew he was God, because nobody wants a 3-year-old who knows he is God. You just don't. Yeah, you're trying to give him a bath. He keeps popping up on top of the water. This is not a good idea. But I have time to think of these things. I only work Sundays. So this progression, when we do not know, but you will find, especially in the book of Mark, by the way, but even here in John, times where Jesus learns something. Here he finds out Lazarus has been in a tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and it stops. That should be a period, but it isn't. If you're thinking, well, the Bible has a comma there. No, it doesn't. They did not have punctuation when this is written. We guess at where that is. This should be, because look at it, 4 days in a tomb, 2 miles. He could have walked it in a half hour. He didn't. Why not? Well, let's read. And if you're thinking, to make it more interesting, no. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. That was nice of them. That was very nice of them. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Notice that before? Somebody's hurt. You were 2 miles away. You could have been here. That's going to be brought up by both of them. Somebody's hurt. Is it all right to be hurt at God's lack of action? Yeah. In fact, I would say it's honest. Be honest about these things. Don't be one of those people. Do not be one of those people that if I'm praying for a friend who has cancer and I'm praying, it looks like they got a shot, but then they die, and you say, well, God answered your prayer. He just said, no, do not be that person. I will have words with you, and I know words, and I know these stories, and I will use the stories. Don't do that. You will be what Job called a miserable comforter. Instead, say, I don't know why either. Thank you. I don't know why that prayer didn't go anywhere. Are you sinning? Don't do that. Do not do that. You see, that's what we do. We try to find a way to excuse God's lack of action or to excuse what he did. Don't do that. Mark what he did. Believe in him even if you're upset. That's the way to do this. He will get you through life that way. But be honest. Be honest in your faith. I have a friend. I actually know one person in this life who is always happy. I won't say her name because I didn't ask permission. But years ago, I went to her and I'll call her Sally. That's not her name. I said, Sally, you're always happy. She goes, yeah. I said, I got to ask you a question. And she knew what it was. She came back and she goes, I'm not stupid and I'm not unobservant. This is just the way God made me. Thank you. That's because I was wondering about both of those. Thank you. Most of us aren't like that. Most of us have a full range of emotions. So do these people. Lord, what was the first thing she says? If you'd been here, my brother would not have died. She'd seen him heal strangers. Why would you heal strangers and not my brother? You loved Lazarus. We thought you did. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. What is she suggesting? I bet you could raise him from the dead. No, she isn't, because that had never been on offer. All she is trying to say is, I still believe you're the Son of God. I just don't know why you let us down. Why did you heal everybody else? Because you see what happens here? Since we know the end of the story, we assume she's asking for that. No. She has no clue. She is saying, you disappointed me, but I still believe in you. I just don't know. I'm hurt. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. She goes, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. You see, she's not looking for today. She's thinking later. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, if he'd stopped there, I got some chills. I still get chills. I still get those chills. But then he goes somewhere I didn't expect him to go. This is a very surprising set of turns. He's looking at this woman who just lost her brother. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Did you ever notice how awkward this is? What position this puts her in? Do you believe me or your life and eyes and situation? Sometimes we have to believe in God even when our life seems to scream that he's not there. This is hard. And he's looking at a woman who is mourning her brother and saying, if you believe in me, you won't die. What is he suggesting about Lazarus then? That would be natural to think that, wouldn't it? Are you saying my brother doubted you? She goes, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Now that's an interesting phrase. I would have expected her, if she said this, because that's a fantastic thing of faith, to say, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who came into the world. He didn't say that. It's like, who's still holding back. You haven't really given us your best. I believe that you will be who you're supposed to be. Did you ever notice that? Wow. After she said this, she just leaves. She's hurt, she's confused. She goes back and calls her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. That's interesting. I'm not sure she told the truth. If Jesus is asking for her, that wasn't mentioned, was it? But we often do this, don't we? I will face that person, but not alone, you're coming with me. I will deal with this in a large group. So when Mary heard this, she gets up quickly and went to him. Now look at this. Jesus had not yet entered the village. It's 2 miles. But he had stopped. But was still at the place where Martha had met him. Why would you stop? Well, I don't live in Jesus' head, but my take on this is Jesus was hurting too. Jesus was hurting that Lazarus had to go through what Lazarus went through, and Mary and Martha and their friends are having to go through what they're going through so that Jesus can show them something which the world needs to know. They were the ones picked to suffer so that the world could learn something. Think about that. Did you ever read the works of Corrie ten Boom, who lived through the Holocaust, and faith through the Holocaust? You're going, wow, this is so inspiring. Yeah, how'd you get that story? Because somebody went through hell and was not rescued and watched her sister die. That's how you got that story. We got faith from somebody else's train-wrecked life. And Jesus sometimes has to pick who's going to get wrecked. Do you think he cares? Yeah, he couldn't even advance. He had stopped. It hurt him. We did a funeral once in Michigan for a young person. I really wish I could tell you all the backstory. It's an amazing story. But his friends, he was 19 years old. He overdosed. And so many of his friends wanted to come to the funeral, but they had never been to a funeral or inside a funeral home at this stage. And you'd look out through the windows, and there were, 30, 50 outside in the lawn, smoking, crying, unsure of what to do. They could not make that step to come in the room. I see Jesus there too. When the Jews who had been with Mary at the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. And again, I love these people. They weren't going to let her mourn alone. We're going to go with you. I love these people. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. Guess what? The first thing she says is, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. Had they discussed this? Probably. Sisters do that, but that's the normal thing to think. It's a little thing. I read the story once of a Jewish man whose baby, I think they were like 2 years old, they were unattended for just a moment in the bathtub, and they drowned. Just in a little bit of water. And in his prayer to God, he kept saying, you could have moved that plug. It's a little plug. You made the universe. You made the sun. You could have, and he goes at God over this. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what we feel, but we're afraid to say. Jesus here is giving you permission to say it. Come, let us reason together, says the Lord. Let's walk this out. Jesus saw her weeping. He didn't respond to her. And the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Once again, how much did he know? How much God was in Jesus and how much man? We don't know. There is no way to answer the question, but you need to keep it in mind. For times like this, come and see, Lord, they replied. In other words, you got to walk. Jesus wept. Now that's the verse we always wanted to memorize, if you had to memorize one for Bible school, but it doesn't mean that he teared up. It's a sobbing, racking cry. It's a heaving cry. We used to sing a song, and perhaps we still do in some churches. Our church sings mainly newer songs, except that he throws a bluegrass one in every now and then because we're Nashville. And he'll throw a Gaither song in there sometimes as well, because he knows that just annoys me. But mainly, we used to sing the song, Does Jesus Care When My Heart Is... You remember that one? And then the chorus swells. Oh, yes, he cares. I know he cares. He does, but that doesn't mean he's going to take it away. Years ago, I want to talk about Lancaster. Years ago, I've lived with pain for a long time. Some of that's my fault, some of it's genetics, but migraine-ish type pain. And the whole time I was there, I lived with it. They knew about that. Came back to visit a couple years after I'd left. And some of the ladies, Carolyn Vanata and some others, came to me and said, we just want to let you know, we pray for you every week when we get in our prayer circle that God will take your pain away. And I said, stop. And they looked at me and I said, you're being very sweet and you're being very kind and I'm overwhelmed by your kindness. But a couple of things. The main one is this. I think the pain makes me a nicer person. Because I used to not care about people in pain till I had pain. I had a friend once who even smiling told me, I've never had a headache in my life. Yeah, that's what I want to hear. So I looked at him. I said, Kevin, you're a carrier. You just cause pain in everyone else's life. You live out your function well. You perform it well. Sometimes, and C.S. Lewis helped me with this, and the problem of pain. He helped me a lot with this. Sometimes the very thing we hate and we want removed from our life is what makes us a better person than we would have been had we not had it. Just a thought. The Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man kept this man from dying? Open the eyes of a blind man, that's a big thing. Getting the guy past an infection, that's a little thing for you. Jesus, once more deeply moved, he is not getting better, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. Now, I'm gonna submit something to you. And Tim, a while ago, and I love Tim. Tim's family means the world to me. And Tim said something about we can disagree without being disagreeable. You can disagree with me on this because I could be wrong. I don't think she was saying what it looks like she's saying. I think she's trying to protect him. Because if you open the tomb in the presence of a rabbi, the rabbi is unclean. He can no longer be a rabbi until he goes through the cleansing. I think she's trying to remind him that's against the rules. We can't do that. It's a firm rule. We can't do this. But I want you to, when you read the Gospels, I hate to give away the plot. When you read the Gospels, I want you to notice something. Love trumps law every single time. Those of us who are on a relentless search for the laws of God so that we may please him need to remember that when he gave us the laws, it was love God and love each other. And we ignored that and went looking for the other laws. Interesting. Bad odor. Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you send me. And he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen. It would have been a little freaky, let's be honest. Now, they'd not seen any of the mummy movies, but still, a little freaky. Jesus says, take off the grave clothes and let him go. I heard a preacher do a whole sermon on this once, and I actually enjoyed this. He completely went around the point, but his point was valid. And his idea was, often we are raised from the dead in baptism, but we still carry the grave clothes of our old life with us. We need to get them. And I thought, that's actually a very creative way of using that story. So now you may use that. But anyway, you see the point? We rushed to get to Jesus raising Lazarus, and we missed all that. Well, I've only got like 10 minutes tops before I have to let you go because they released the children, and who knows where they'll go without us. So, but real quick, just because I mentioned it a while ago, the first one, John chapter 2. They're at a wedding. Jesus' mother was there, verse 1. Verse 2, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. I like this story already because it is very human. At a wedding, the women are there. They are invested. They're noticing stuff. There will be a quiz later. What'd you think of her shoes? They had shoes? You know, it's a difficult, and the men are there. You know, we were invited. That's it. So we're just hanging around hoping there's cake. We have no other, we didn't want to be here, but we have to be here. So she's there, they're invited. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. That's all she said, a factual statement. Had Jesus been not God, just a guy, he would have said, bummer. Tell Habib to bring the camel around, we're gone. But that's not what happened because he is God. He knows, she thinks she said, fix this. She didn't, but she thinks she did. Jesus says, woman, and that's not, when we say woman, it's like, woman. No, this was a term of endearment and respect. Woman, why do you involve me? My hour is not yet come. Let's review. She thinks she told him to do something, but she didn't. He says, no. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. She thinks he meant yes. Any men in the room want to testify here? Don't unless your wife is teaching a class. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Stop. We don't get this. This verse does not belong. These are big amphora, and you did this ritual washing because of all the rules, religious rules. I'm not making this up. You would, one prayer as the water dripped off this arm, another, these were washing up jars. These were dirty water jars. These have nothing to do with a story about wine. You would never ever put wine in these. You're not allowed to put wine in these. It is unclean. It's against the rules to put wine in these. This would be rather like watching a car chase in a cop movie, and then all of a sudden they stop and they cut to Africa and they say, the meerkat lives in colonies of 20, and you're going, that has nothing to do with the card. That's exact, everybody in the first century would have had the meerkat reaction right there, going, what? Why are we talking about these? Jesus says to the servants, fill the jar with water, so they filled them to the brim. You didn't fill them to the brim. You didn't, because spilling made the area unclean. Why'd they fill them to the brim? I think I know. I think Mary was looking at them. And I've seen pictures of Mary. I have, and she's white, which is a bit of a surprise. It's a surprise. And she's always wearing blue with a little white headbandy thing sticking out. And she's glowing, which would have been remarkable. And she's always holding Jesus, either the baby Jesus or the dying Jesus. So it's either Madonna or La Pieta, but it's one of those two. And her head's always that photographer thing that they make us do, that no human does. I've seen those pictures. But remember, Mary's own kids didn't believe their story. They thought their mom was a loose woman. So did the neighbors. She would have grown up hard. There would have been lines on her face, calluses on her hands, and a look in her eyes. They filled them to the brim. He says, go draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so. The master tasted the water. And I love the next line here. There are some lines that they didn't need to put in the Bible. They just didn't need to put them in the Bible. There's one here. He did not realize where it had come from. Duh. Nobody thought he tasted something thinking it came from there. That's completely... And we go, he changed the water to wine. It was the best ever. And by the way, I've had people say, no, that was grape juice. People. Everyone brings out the choice wine first and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. Does that work with grape juice? After they've been thoroughly graped, we bring out, no, I'm not suggesting anybody got drunk, but you got to quit making this American fundamentalist Christian. This is Jesus' first century. They had different rules. We got to play with them. And people go, he changed the water to wine. That's not the point. The point is what water he changed to wine. He took the rules, the traditions, the laws, the burdens we pile on ourselves, that you've got to do all this to please God, and he turned it to the wine of joy. And we miss that because we're looking for the ta-da. Where did he get the water? There were empty wine jars everywhere. He could have filled them. He didn't. And he could have filled them at a distance without a word. Just the wine bag, just, and nobody knows why. He didn't do that. He went to the rules and traditions we bind on ourselves, and he turned that to joy. I got to quit. But I will tell you, I'll give you an example of this. I was in East Tennessee. Church there had called because they were dying, withering on the vine. And they said, just come spend a week with us, see what we're doing and see how we can, adjust the way we're doing things. So I preached that Sunday morning. Teens were over there all just kind of. I went up to the elders later and I said, you're teens. They did clump. That's always a healthy sign. But they seemed distressed. They go, well, they're kind of mad at us. Why? Well, they clapped at a baptism last week. We told them not to. By the way, I have no idea if that's an issue here or not. But I'm leaving in a few minutes, so don't care. This is the end of the summer series, and this may make you glad that it's over. So, there we are. And I said, why'd you tell them not to? And they said, well, it made a couple of our older members upset. By the way, that's a stereotype. In our church, we have 90-year-olds who are up for anything. So I'm not trying to paint old people all the same, all right? But they had a couple of them. And I said, well, congratulations, you just turned your church into a one-generation church. And they said, well, we don't want to. I said, the Bible says when a person is baptized, the angels in heaven rejoice. What do you think that scene looks like? Do you think they're up there going, amen? Sometimes we have to rejoice in the God we have rather than turning him into the God we got used to and controlled with all of our rules and ideas. Religion is not a magic act where you have to do everything exactly right to get the rabbit. It's a dance. It's a relationship. Every one of these stories is a give and take between God and human beings, and he never gets tired of it. I had 2 kids. They're big now. And one of the things I always loved was wrestling with them. Had to quit pretty soon with my son. He turned out 6'5" Marine. We'd start to wrestle, and I go, I'm afraid one of us is going to get hurt. I didn't want to tell him which one I thought. But I loved that wrestling bet. Why? Because that's what you do, isn't it? God will wrestle with you. He will dance with you. He will walk with you. As long as you're wrestling with God, at least you're in contact with him. It's when you get all mad and turn away, he can't reach you. Engage. Live in the Gospels, because the law of Jesus is the only law we need to know. Thank you for letting me play. I was told to end with a prayer, so I'm going to do that, and it's going to be a short prayer because I've gone long. Here we go.